with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with Rector of Damn Near Kilder, Chris Prunty, along with continued special guest, Daniel Quinn. I have been waiting 17 letters so I could hit you with that one joke. And man, all I can say is worth it. Anyway, on today's episode, we are continuing our dive into the world of Solarpunk as brought to you by listener Jason. In our last episode, we created a fantastical world full of plant GMO technology that just so happens to be a weird prison-like cell for humanity, but mostly it's so we get better. It's hopeful and bright, I promise. Just continue to listen. On today's episode, we are talking about conflict. We are talking about technology, and we're each bringing our own faction into the world of 1,000 pots here in our part 2 of Solarpunk. Chris, why don't you go ahead and start us off today?
Well, the idea for my technology comes from the Foundation novels. I think it's called Psychohistory, but I wanted it to
Ooh.
be something that was more related to the teaching of humanities. And as you know, I have a special place in my heart for the algorithm. So
Yes, as
I,
do we all. All hail the algorithm.
I wanted it to be the algorithm that is teaching humanity, that is kind of designing this world and setting up what obstacles we need to be taught to overcome. I didn't have a word that was as catchy as psychohistory, but I thought psychological permutation.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it is kind of predicting where humanity will end up, the obstacles that we have, and how it has to teach us that. And so, yeah, uh, that is my technology.
So I rather like that because it flips the perverse algorithm that we had last time. Oh wait, no, it doesn't, because the algorithm was also good to us in our last more dark cyberpunk future, wasn't it?
It was kind of a question mark whether it was good or bad. It was
Okay.
originally good, I think, and then it ended up being bad.
Well, because algorithms, like all technology, are not necessarily inherently
Yeah.
neutral. It's based on the programmer. And I
Oh,
like the fact that Chris is bringing us a benevolent algorithm for once.
but the way that it interacts with humanity or with people themselves is the fact that it's integrated with humanity and with the conscious. So I thought the way that it would do this is the people who are behind the veil,
So that,
uh,
like the empaths.
yeah, the empaths. The reason they can do that is because the algorithm is allowing them to see their code, their feelings, and sharing the link.
Oh.
And it is not to get into my group, but they are the group of people who are kind of tweaking the things or looking at it and being like, yes, yes, we're all on board. We're currently doing this, but to make sure that we don't have what I was saying earlier, the perverse instantiation of where it would cause some sort of negative result, or where it would be like, no, humanity will never be ready because I need 100 on this test, and there's no way to get 100.
Hmm.
So there's like an intuitiveness that's built into the algorithm. So like you said, perverse instantiation in the sense that like we're not going to end up with some result that is like a result of logic, since there's like the algorithm itself is embedded in the way human beings are.
So imagine you're one of these people who can feel the empathy of 10 million people and also has the processing power or mind that is boosted by this AI or algorithm. You would be able to reach, well, hopefully, be able to reach a yes or no kind of answer for is humanity ready?
Yeah, I think that we established like the seekers of the veil or the people beyond the veil as as super empaths in the last episode, and I love the fact that that kind of continues on with our we kind of maintain that thread with this idea. Plus, I also want to integrate the idea of our technology, that this technology is available only because of this vast neural network that's created through genetically modified plants. And
Yeah,
I
I
know
wanted to
that's
bring that up too. Yeah, to make sure it's
yeah.
biological.
I want there to be some connection between like because oftentimes humanity tends to see trees as like uncaring or having no emotion, and I love this idea that we discover immense empathy once we are connected into a vast neural network specifically through plants, and I think that'd be kind of an interesting take to have on it.
I have a feeling that Chris's faction will probably get into the people who are surrounding those empaths and maybe how that's set up. So I don't want to talk about that yet. I have a feeling that's where he's going. But like, it would be interesting to see like where these empaths reside if they're beyond the veil, and to what degree is it like enmeshed with nature? Because clearly, like they are literally rooted into whatever this neural network is that surrounds and kind of pierces through the veil itself.
So speaking of like the genetically modified plants and everything like that, I want to bring up my technology since we're starting with technology. I want there to be an effective immortality with humanity that is again mostly because we are now because there's this idea in Solarpunk, right, that we're strictly going to be using, you know, uh, economic friendly or not economic, but
Ecological.
ecologically friendly technology, right? And so, what better way to express that than to have it be all plant based, which is my idea in the first place, but also I just wanted humans to be, I wanted there to be a reason that they can kind of explain away the simulation aspect of it, and to also explain away the idea that there's no outside of very rare circumstances extreme catastrophic death. And I think part of that is essentially through a weird mutation of photosynthesis in a lot of ways. Like you're taking a lot of the hunger and pain and age and decay out of it in a lot of ways, and I did want that to be in some way plant-based again, because fuck it, if we're going weird and utopic, why not go immortal as well?
So, like, to make sure I understand, in the human race, which I imagine is either sleeping or in some way plugged into this like plant based neural network, they themselves are photosynthesizing, so their bodies can take in nutrients just like a plant.
Among other things, yeah, I think I think that it helps with a post scarcity society where people will still eat and they'll still consume things, but because of the way that we've integrated technology, it now is make it much easier, and the cost of resources significantly less compared to where we were previously. Because if you look at a lot of the devastating technology that we're using now, a lot of it does come down to consumption, and in a lot of cases, it can also be tracked down to consumption for food or for uh, you know that kind of for sustenance, essentially.
Do you see like the humans in the simulate in the veil? Are they like, you know, a series of like glorified tombs, and that they're sleeping in these tombs and they're experiencing this consensus reality? Or do you envision them like interacting kind of like in a holodeck situation where it's like half simulation from the plants and they're actually moving around? That's the one thing I'm trying to grapple with, like
Ooh.
for all of us, like that's the actual environment that they're in the veil.
That's actually a really good question, and because Chris is the one who kind of introduced it, I'd rather him answer that.
So I thought that they would have physical bodies, and kind of, ooh, if we want to take from a motif of some kind, it could be
Mhm.
literally the tree of life kind of thing, of all of these roots spreading out and these little pods filled with the consciousness of people. And maybe they don't fully have built bodies kind of
Mhm.
thing, because the deterioration and kind of resources going into it, they're like little seeds waiting to be planted outside
Oh,
of it.
neat. So they're in a, so to take Rob's concept, then like we've reconfigured humanity to use the sun so that we ourselves can get our resources like plants do, but our minds still experience like a world we're used to while the world heals. Is that what we're kind of like going towards?
Yeah,
Oh wow, that's that's really kind of crazy, actually.
It's weird, right?
Yeah, that's like utterly bizarre in a way I wasn't expecting, but that's pretty cool.
Because I want to make sure like we were all on the same page with that, because I feel like we can tie in our concepts to it. So now I know like the things I was thinking about, I can twist them to make them work that way. But that's really cool.
I mean, I feel like I feel like most of my stuff kind of fits within the simulation anyway. But man, okay, yeah, that's pretty dope. Okay,
Cool.
yeah. Daniel, why don't you go ahead and kick us off with your technology, because we're at the end of tech at this point.
So I wanted to bring us back to furries because I feel like we had a brief brush with furries, and I thought I could bring that back,
Hmm.
I
especially
have
as
no idea what you're referring to.
since we know we're in a friendly and this is like utopian society. So furries
Hmm.
are people like furries too. So obviously we don't have. What I'm thinking of is um, the people who experience this consensus reality while they're dreaming in this kind of as people, like while they're sleeping. Um, they're when they're born, they're paired with um, like a pet that's kind of like a familiar, and this entity it either has, I guess since it's a simulation, has a part of their consciousness bonded to it. So in a way, like the pet itself contains aspects of you in it, and it's a reflection of you in some ways. But for life, that pet follows you, and so I guess since this is a consensus reality, the pet is virtual then. But the pet itself contains like a fragment of you, so it's in a sense you're familiar. So everyone in the society has these like these familiars that follow them around and that they're able to confide in, that are kind of like their closest friends, in a sense, that they're born with and that they die with. And so I wanted to have it kind of be like someone's a little piece of your spirit that follows you around in a sense.
Yeah, that's very similar to something like the Golden Compass, for example,
Uh,
where your familiars are literally part of your soul or a representation of your soul.
oh yeah, there
Uh,
you go. That's what I get
yeah,
for not reading that entire series. Or
Daniel,
much of
it's
that series.
it's fine. You didn't miss that much. Uh, but what
and
I do want to talk
oh,
about, actually, what I do want to heap praise upon is the idea that you're creating, like this familiar, which is essentially expanding upon the theme that we have of connection and bonds and also empathy with another living creature. I think
Mhm.
the idea that you're creating a bond with yourself
Yeah.
first speaks volumes, and I think that's really smart. um what how do you see this kind of animal companion going? Is it an expression in this? Do you choose what the familiar is, or how would that work exactly?
I think part of the lesson or the purpose of it is, like you're saying, part of it is like understanding yourself over time because it's reflect a part of you is reflected in it. So maybe like either a insecurity you have or maybe some positive quality you have is reflected in the animal. But at the same time, I want it to be that you have to learn to take care of nature in some way, and so you have to learn to take care of this creature and nourish it.
That's really cool. I kind of like the idea more that it's a representation of your insecurity,
Yeah.
because then it's something that you can learn from
Well,
more
maybe
than
it's
anything
cowardly
else.
if there's a cowardliness in you.
Yeah, yeah, or even like if it's a rat, like
Yeah.
then you're probably gonna get made fun of for having a rat familiar. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, it's like I'm not even like that, and then like through time you recognize, actually there's a lot of good things about this familiar, and there's a lot of good things that it's
I can
also like,
expand on. Yeah.
yeah, but it's also like you learning to appreciate the smaller or insignificant or even shittier things, like things that other people would otherwise look down on, and I can imagine that you're looking essentially at weird opposites from
Mhm.
personalities. Like I imagine a cute petite girl with a giant bear
Yeah, yeah.
familiar.
That's what I want, like
It,
weird combinations like that.
yes, I agree. I agree. I'm kind of, I think we're on the same page there, where we want, it's a confrontation of some aspect of yourself that you dislike,
Yeah.
and I like that a lot, actually.
okay. I do have one thing that I wanted to say. I was just going to compare this to Digimon.
Oh, Digimon, yeah.
Sorry, say it again. Say it again. I want a clear cut version of that so I can go off on it, because I love Digimon.
I just feel like Daniel. Have you seen Digimon?
I during the whole Pokemon craze, which was how old were we then? Like maybe like you know 13 or 14. I know
28.
that
Yeah.
it was one of the cartoons.
I would just like to say that I love Digimon unabashedly. It was like my one of my first tastes into being a big weeb is watching the first season of Digimon. Also, I have to say, Digimon has grown way more than Pokemon has. Like Pokemon is always going to be more popular, but Digimon all like ultimately has better games and do way more interesting things with the premise than Pokemon ever does.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Hot
Yeah.
take.
Hot take, but a lot of people agree with me. So, fucking send that hate mail to worldbuildwithus@gmail.com if you got a problem with it. Actually, so this idea of learning through your familiar, I actually want to get into that because it ties in a little bit with the conflict that I had in mind.
Cool.
So, because we're in a post scarcity society, because we're in, a simulation and all of that, I was trying to figure out an interesting way to create conflict that isn't physical and isn't necessarily emotional. I didn't want to get into, dueling artists or anything like that. What I wanted to get into was something that I think a lot of people in our generation actually struggle with, which is the idea of ennui. Like kind of finding purpose within yourself. And I wanted to, and I actually did the thing that Daniel always asks me to do. So I actually prepared in advance this time, which is to make it like tangible or physical in some way. It's actually essentially a coming of age ritual called the 12 lifetimes, where you in your youth you travel to 12 vastly different cultures and societies and planets and try and basically and you live what is essentially a lifetime there, growing up in that culture, learning to love what they love, and then you do it 11 more times. And that way, it's essentially a spiritual wheel that you kind of process. And only after you walk the 12 lifetimes are you considered an adult in the society. And you can kind of pick and choose where you want to go based on, what society and what value you held that meant the most to you. And also the choosing in and of itself is also a really important aspect of becoming an adult as well.
I love that. That's so like I feel like almost Star Trek too, in the sense that you're trying to fulfill your best self. And so the way that you're doing that, at least in the setting, is you're forced to kind of take a trek into different societies to learn what is your best self by being exposed to different things.
Exactly. And I was thinking about travel because I think travel often brings out the person who you are the most. It kind of distills you down into a raw essence. And some people really hate travel. Some people
Me,
thrive on yes, I was thinking of you specifically, yes.
hate traveling. I would be
Right.
like the girl that doesn't want to move from planet to planet. I'm like, oh, just let me stay home.
And then on your 12th lifetime you're like, "All right, it's
I get
okay, I guess."
it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but that's the general concept is I think traveling through exposure to different lifestyles and through different experiences and different peoples, I think it actually does and again creates bonds among the 12 different lifestyles and also creates this sense of empathy. You're like, "Oh, I
Mhm.
don't agree with that, but I can see why you would. I spent time in a similar situation." That kind of thing.
Are there only 12 areas that they can visit, or is part of the choice what you were saying as like to reflect them?
I would imagine that the people, the empaths, the people beyond the veil, they essentially create the path, or they create the 12 planets that they would discover and explore. Also, there might be something to the algorithm that you brought up in the technology aspect of it as well, where every 12 lifetime, every 12 lifetime is different, but
Hmm.
it's based partly on the algorithm and it's based partly on maybe the empaths kind of influence as well.
Yeah, because they would know. Not only would they know like physical things about you, the empaths that is, but they'd also know about like your mental pattern in a sense, because that's really what you are inside this tree. So they could guidance you to locations among those 12 points. Maybe there's like a million billion different places you could go, but they pick 12 that suit you and your path.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, actually, have any of you seen the Black Mirror episode "Hang the DJ"?
Oh, I that sounds familiar. I saw all the episodes, but which one was that one exactly?
That's the one where they you're these two people are basically put into a dating app, but it's like a lifetime system
Oh yeah,
thing.
yeah. That one
Yeah.
was actually a positive ending kind of one, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes, it
Mhm.
was. And also I think it's pretty appropriate considering, where that's the algorithm. It's like, hey, we're choosing these mates, and the way that you get to your certain path is, okay, we're going to give you the one that you really want, like first or second, and
Mhm.
then the seven after that are all going to be terrible and make you want to go back to that one,
To appreciate
and
it,
then
yeah.
yeah. I think something like that might actually work, where it's like it's slightly manipulative, but it's also testing out what works and what doesn't. They gain information from each subsequent lifetime that you would spend.
I mean, it makes sense. That's what I like about this, and it makes sense in with the concept of this neural network and Chris's algorithm.
Yeah, and again, I wanted the main theme in my mind that I do want to continue to think on is bonds, and I think creating bonds by living 12 lifetimes is pretty damn good.
It's funny because my conflict is similar to that, but it creates a conflict out of that situation.
So go ahead, roll right into it, Daniel.
Like I had the idea that children um, are in the society are probably really smart, so most children are savants in some way, and they're moved from mentor to mentor. So I can adjust this to mean that they move from path to path, right? But I also had the notion that you don't really have specific parents, like you're raised by each group you're sent to. So if we're using the 12 path situation, it would be like you're moving from mentor to mentor, who are in a sense all your family and all your parents. And so in order to get like once they get past these to the 12 paths, they might have selected what they really want to do in life. So maybe they've learned I'm going to be like a pilot or something, right? That's what my skill set has led me to. So they kind of end up picking where they want to be. But the reaction to that and conflict, I wanted there to be a youth counterculture or like a punk culture that rejects the notion of them having to figure out their path. Like the counterculture thinks that this is a rigid structure that's been imposed on them, and they don't want to be part of it, and they want to break away. They want to go beyond the veil, and so they're exposed to the temptations of the man in gray potentially, and so there's a conflict in the society of like doing what traditionally makes sense to build your path, and the few who are like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to do my own thing, and I'm going to alienate myself from society because I feel like there's something more beyond this that I'm not aware of.
That's really cool, actually. And part of me, okay, uh, there's a slightly sinister side to this that I'm thinking of, where there's an author who wrote a book called Capitalist Realism, which essentially breaks down how capitalism works in a lot of ways. And one of the ways it does so is through pre-corporation, which is the idea that you're going to have this way to express your rebellion, but it's done so entirely through the system as it is. And
Mhm.
so people who are in this counterculture eventually recognize that everything that they're doing is to feed into the system even more. I feel like that's probably what happens when you grow out of the system, of punk, right?
Mhm.
Where it's like you reject the system until you realize that
It works.
there's right, and there's no way to fight against it
Right.
anymore.
Right.
Or it's like, oh, my expression of rebellion has already been created for me.
Right.
It's not.
And that's why it's a youth counterculture, because
Yes.
they realize, and like once they get older they realize that there's a purpose to the setup. But I like the temptation. I like the idea that there is a tempter out there, and that's that man in gray who, as we know, was an empath and wants to shut the veil down. So that's why he's
Mhm.
instigating them kind of behind the scenes.
I still believe that the man in gray is an empath. Like
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
just
Or he
doing
still
it in a
is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He's just doing it in a very uh
subtle.
he's basically no, he's basically playing devil's advocate.
Yeah,
He's the
that's what I
part
mean.
that's necessary. He's like, hey, you
Mhm.
need a way to express rebellion, and
Right.
I'm going to allow that to
Oh, I
be
like that. So
true.
maybe he's part of he's one of the functions of, in the sense, the algorithm and the way the empaths work. He's like the
Yeah,
one to push things ahead in his own way, but he's part of the whole scheme.
correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Chris, what was your conflict?
Part of my conflict was involving uh, kind of like the man in gray. To go once again back to him, we were saying that he was someone who believes that humanity can't get ready in a simulation. It can't can't evolve, can't further their knowledge unless they go into a world with stakes.
Yeah.
Correct?
Hmm.
Right.
The conflict that I wanted it was him kind of gathering people to his team and his way of thinking. I wanted him to gather acolytes that could be with his way of thinking and kind of cause this resurgence of people that want to leave the simulation and want to experience the real world, even if they're not ready.
Are they like a secret kind of group, or are they like really loud protester types?
I viewed them as they are loud in their own way. Like they will purposely point out the limitations of a simulation. I'm not really sure how they would display that, but imagine if they did things with their knowledge that made people kind of, oh, yeah, this is all fake, isn't it?
So we're saying that people do know that they're in like a temporary space, essentially, in some way.
Yeah, but I believe there is something to be said about suspension of disbelief or kind of just getting into it. Like, if you spent 2,000 years in a dream
Hmm.
and you woke up, would you be sure you were dreaming? Or would you think this was the dream kind of thing?
Hmm. So they poke at certainty, in a sense. Then you're saying.
Correct. And to go back how we wanted things to be hopeful and whimsical, I wanted them to do this. Maybe it's not the man in gray, because he seemed a little bit sinister, but I wanted it to be whimsical villainy in the sense of just over the top kind of stuff that doesn't fit with reality of superhero like stuff.
So you're talking about like a Mr. Mixie Spicklick type thing,
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
where it's
I
like
was
cartoonish mischief type thing.
Because
yes.
they're like exploiting the system to show that this isn't quite right. This reality we live in.
Yeah. One thing that I do want to point out that I really love about that idea is surrounds you're essentially forcing people to choose what reality is
Hmm.
on a higher, deeper philosophical sense, right? Like when you say, if you live in a dream for 2,000 years, do you even know what awake is anymore?
Mhm.
And I think that because that's a hard question to ask, and I think that's what that group is essentially asking.
They're like
And I
villain
think
philosophers, then, in a sense.
yes, I wanted to point that out. That yes, essentially the conflict here is philosophical.
Oh, I like
It,
that.
actually, in a lot of ways, you could actually approach them like Dadaists.
Yeah,
Where they're pointing out the absurdity of art and stuff like that. So I could see that. Yeah. So Chris, you basically created Dadaists.
yeah, I
That's
love
awesome. Yeah,
that.
that's
Hey,
dope.
They just parade a bunch of toilets around. It's perfect.
Yeah, right, but it's more along the lines of, hey, how can we break reality?
Yeah,
How
yeah.
can we break every rule that people already know to show them the absurdity of the simulation and how much it doesn't matter?
And it seems like they're only villainous in the sense that they're attacking the status philosophy, rather they're not like saying this whole thing is bad and I want to burn it down. They're just saying like, to what extent will this be effective, and they're questioning the apparatus. So they're kind of necessary, like in the grand scheme of things, among all the philosophy of all the people who are thinking about the society they live in. Like they're
For
a questioning voice.
for sure. They're asking people to make, they're questioning whether or not this is valid or whether or not this simulation is helpful at all.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Great job, Chris. I'm
yeah,
proud of you.
yeah, and I thought every villain also needs a group of heroes that are not able to break the simulation or unwilling to break the simulation. And I wanted it to be the people who make the algorithm seamlessly work in the world and try to make it as real as possible. And the way that I was going to call them was the Order of the Gilded Cage.
Ooh.
And
That's way
they,
more sinister than it sounds.
I
I know
know,
it's like
that's what makes
nice and
Yeah,
bad.
that's like you it's like you're treating it like you're in a prison, and I don't like that idea. I don't like the name.
well, that's the thing. They understand that this is a prison, but
Mm.
they want humanity to get out. They're jailers of rehabilitation.
It's a bird cage, is what they're saying. It's like
Okay.
it's necessary to keep you safe.
Yeah.
Is a school a prison?
Yes, it's okay. If we want to take it
You're
metaphorically, it could
right.
be. It's like it's a temporary prison. It's a falsification of the real world that kids will go into, but it's a necessary prison.
See, I don't necessarily see this simulation as a prison. I see it more as a school. Like this is
Yeah,
prep school for when you're actually ready to make a utopia. You know, when you're ready to exit the simulation and create a culture and society that lasts forever.
Well, can people leave the simulation voluntarily?
hmm. I
I
feel
think
like it
yeah.
shouldn't be allowed.
But that's not
Really?
utopia then.
Yeah,
I feel
I
like
agree. I
it
think
can't be allowed because they don't have bodies.
well no, I think that you should have some sense of choice, right? Like there has to be some sense of agency to cast off the simulation because otherwise there is some level of fascism to it, right? There's some level of authoritarianism that you're taking away choice, and what's worse than taking away someone's choice?
Well, maybe you have to achieve it though. Like, so if these people, like, they're essentially minds at the moment, like they have bodies in the sense that they're these seed pod things. Maybe the empaths are people who have achieved that, and that's why they're outside the simulation to guide it.
Wait a minute. I could see that
Oh,
they do allow people to leave, but they make sure that they make an informed choice. They show them what the inside world can be, and due to the limitation, they're like, we can't really get you to come back in. So,
Right.
yes, you
I
can,
like that. That's
but
perfect.
yeah, I
we
like
don't
that a
think
lot.
you're ready, and we love you. Please don't do
Because
that.
the world of ruin outside, like once we embody you, we can't put you back in the simulation because you it will have to break you to do that.
And that's what makes the villains actually like they want people to leave, but
Mhm.
they know if they leave, there won't be the voice telling people to leave.
Right.
Interesting. Okay, that I like that. I like that.
They're
Okay.
actually they're both heroes. They're just two different sides of or not morality, but I guess the philosophical sense of what is the right thing to do. And they're all part of the algorithm. They just don't know it.
Of
Do
course.
you see them as like the Gilded Cage? Like, are they in a sense like benevolent programmers? Like, so are they in the company of the empaths, or are they like in the simulation and they're working on parts of the simulation actively?
There are people who have realized that it's a simulation and but they're not empaths, but they're like, yeah, we do know that this is a simulation. Stop being dicks and ruining it for everybody.
Oh, okay. So they're like philosophers more so than like actual programmers of it.
Yeah, yeah. But at the same time, maybe they have. We have the man in gray. I guess
Mhm.
we could have the king in yellow. No,
Or the Crimson King.
no, God,
Remember
no.
him?
Hey, I'm
Uh,
down for a 60s acid rock if you guys are.
Yeah. I was referring to the Dark Tower series, but yes.
that's where it's
See,
from.
I was
I
gonna
know, I
say
know.
that, yeah, King Crimson is Stephen King is a
But
big metal
remember, my
fan.
music
Come on,
stopped
it's
in
alt rock.
1998, though. Remember?
But it's the 60s. It's before 1998.
No, no,
I
he
just, I
meant
don't.
only 1998.
Yeah, I only know up to that 1998 and onward. That's all I know.
Oh my god. Uh,
No, just the year 1988.
Oh, Jesus.
your faction actually I didn't necessarily see it this way when I first created my faction, but I think mine works pretty well with yours because I was thinking that I'm going to bring you through a journey, all right, of my faction because they are the police, right? They are essentially what functions as the police. However, I wanted them to be pro wrestlers.
Oh,
All right.
God. Yes.
And
Thank you.
because I was like, okay, what other function, because the one, there's this whole organization that serve essentially as police, because they're going to be tough and have an expression of physical aggression and physicality in general. And I love pro wrestling. So there's a theatricality to it as well, where it's the police are there to protect and serve and entertain. And to your point, there's also another side of them where there's a rehabilitation side, where they try and take people and bring them into the fold, and they basically enforce community service to try and teach people the better way. Like if you have a troubled kid, they take them into the police and they teach them as much as possible, and they try and get them through something outside or not even necessarily a kid, but a troubled person. And they try and do something that's outside of the 12 lifetimes to be like, hey, this is how we can express it. This is how we can do it. And to kind of go with what you were saying, Chris, this is just a lower level of that. It's kind of like another wall of ice to help people be like, hey, are you really sure that you want to leave? Are you really sure? And this police pro wrestling force are there as like kind of like that's the first line of defense, essentially, right? If these people can't get through to them, then there is a much higher chance that they're going to rebel even further.
Have you ever seen MFKZ?
No, I haven't seen that. What is that?
It's a movie on Netflix, but in it, luchadors are from an ancient order of people who are trying to prevent the end of the world.
What?
And yeah, I loved it, and that's just a subplot in the movie. But
I can support this fully.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, the idea is like the police, they're part police and part like monks, like essentially. That's the idea that I had in mind. And
What I
also they do it in a pro wrestling skin. So
I mean, what I really like about your concept is that it's a literal embodiment of like restorative justice, and the concept of like, instead of punishment, the punishment is going to be to make you be better, basically. So like they'll pull them out of the 12 path to like correct things essentially and send them back in. So like, and that's like a philosophy, I guess like a philosophy I think is essentially in like the justice system. So that's like really neat to see that in the form of luchadors, especially.
yeah, and I thought that the reason I chose pro wrestling as kind of like a rehabilitative thing is because one, it gives you something physical to do, so it helps you. I mean, by putting them through exhaustive programs, you can
Mhm.
essentially break them down physically to force them to focus on the mental, to focus on the emotional. Whatever's breaking them down is you're being confronted with it. That's
Well, it's
that's
it's
part of it.
literal too, which was
Yeah,
so cool because I feel like that's what fantasies do is they take like the concept you're talking about, which is like breaking someone down to rebuild them and put them back together and put them back into the world. These guys literally do that to you. Like,
right. And what they also do is by giving you characters to play in a pro wrestling sense, you're allowing a sense of expression of
it's
that.
therapy.
Yeah, exactly. It's and not only that, but it's also like you, because I don't know how much of a big pro wrestling nerd you guys are. Probably not very much,
Not at
but
all.
I love pro wrestling. It's so dumb and I love it. And it's like but what you learn in wrestling, right, is it's not about actually hurting someone. It's
Mhm.
more about learning your best to protect that other person. And what it teaches you is just how important working together actually is to put on the best show possible. You don't want to hurt your partner. That is like the biggest break of trust in pro
Mhm.
wrestling, is to hurt your partner. And people lose careers over that shit. Like if they if you're working with someone and they hurt you and you're like a bigger guy than them, then guess what? They're not going to work. Like that's just straight up how it is. If they get a reputation of hurting people, then the trust is broken and you can't continue that bond. And that's why I think it works so well.
It goes right back to Chris's melee too, like the melee as their main, form of combat.
Exactly. And I wanted to take that idea that we had and make it even more performative. And I think that it's a great expression of that.
But it's so wacky. I just think it's funny because we've got like Digimon, pets. We've got like the people themselves are actually seed orbs, but they've got wrestlers inside, and then there's like two groups of philosophers who are disagreeing about the situation they're in.
I think one of my favorite things about this setting is that it is simultaneously wacky but also very serious
Yes.
depending on which aspect you really want to focus on. You could just have like fucking pro wrestling police squad action.
No, 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 no. I
Or
like blending the two, where they're just like, all right, well, what do we do? Just like we fight them in the ring.
They have like a disagreement philosophically, like I know how we're going to resolve this, and it's going to involve wrestling.
yes, absolutely. So down with this. Yes. I was a little trepidatious about how I was going to approach this, but now that it's out there, I'm like, this is so satisfying.
No,
This
I
is
feel like you
feels
nailed
so good. Yeah.
it.
Oh, this
Villains
feels
being
good.
literal heels and over the top heels at that. I just
Yes,
love it.
because again, it's an expression of your villainy. It's the perfect
Yeah.
way to express that. It's great. Ah!
So many capes.
Yes, absolutely. Well, capes. You definitely don't watch wrestling.
Blade Raids
No,
can have
I
Kate.
do not. I do not watch wrestling.
Oh man. All right. Daniel, bring us on home. Wrap up the episode with your faction. Let's do it, baby.
So mine were called the People from Beyond the Veil. And I was going back to a couple things. One being that I always, one of my rules I established is that the only real punishment they have is to exile you from their society. And two, other than the restorative justice, which is what the wrestler cops are watching out for, so they don't have to do that to you. And so that should be super rare that this happens. And two, that the world outside the veil is still healing. So it's a world of ruin that's partially, returning to nature. So I thought, well, maybe, there's probably a history involved in the creation of the veil itself that has been lost because it's been such a long time. Who knows how many thousands of years have passed across all these worlds that have been damaged, that are now healing, there's all these veils out there. So I thought perhaps on one of the worlds, or maybe several of the worlds, at some point, one of the solutions they had to creating the veil was to make humans be able to survive the world of ruin. So there are humans out there who live outside the veil who don't know about what's inside the veil or how it works, who are essentially androids, like the physical kind or the fleshy kind. They were constructed to survive in the world of ruin and the kind of environment that it has. But they've been out there for thousands of years. So now they're like regular people in the same way that people are inside the veil, but they're living in like these ruins that have underbrush has grown over them. These skyscrapers have been reclaimed by the land, and they've made like a society out there. And these people are on the outside looking in, trying to find the veil, and they see the veil as kind of like this Eden that they want to get back into. But we've established that that's not quite doable, so which is kind of cool because now, there's these cities overtaken by green. They're living in it. They know about the world as it is and that it's healing, but they may not know that there's humanity sleeping and that they're apart from it. So my concept is that they're the people from beyond the veil, and they're separate from the veil society. So you might have characters who like look upon the veil as something completely different than those who are inside of it.
That's really heartbreaking, Daniel. Like that hurts, but that actually reminds me of Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End. Have you ever seen
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I
So
guess the positive side would be that like they're looking for an ideal, like this ideal utopia, right? To go back to the Eden or the veil. But I guess the realization is that they are in that Eden. Like the world is healing and it's actually healed and they're living in it now. So they don't realize that they're already in the good place.
You
I,
don't
I also
appreciate
want
it.
oh
Or I mean,
yeah.
maybe they don't know that what they have is really good, so they're looking across to the other yard, not realizing that their yard is just fine.
I like the idea that they're gardeners or shepherds or midwives, where they're
Yeah.
ushering in the next phase of humanity. And there's something so pure and wholesome about that in general, but it's also they have something to learn as well because there is some level of jealousy within that as well, where it's
Yeah.
like, yes, we're doing it and we're smart and reasonable and empathic enough to know that this is for the greater good and it's a very good thing, but it's also something that they desperately want as
Hmm.
well. And that's where the heartbreak for me comes in because it's like, man, I want you to have help,
I
and
know.
they have peace, and they have like this
Mhm.
immense peace, but it's also this something that
A
they
longing.
know they can never get and they can never have. It's like, oh, my
I
heart
can
though.
imagine like one of the, let's say someone from beyond the veil takes this like dangerous journey to go to this tower that really is where one of the empaths resides and oversees things. And when they get to that empath, they're thinking, "Oh, I'm finally going to have access to the veil and learn what's what where humanity is." And when they realize what actually is the case, they look back on their society from that tower and they're like, "Actually, the veil is in the other direction that I came from." And that could be like the uplifting part of
Oh,
Okay. All right.
it.
Ooh,
the
man.
veil was the friend you made along the way.
Yes. Exactly.
I'm also kind of thinking, are these like people beyond the veil? Are they the children of exiles from like those who leave?
Yes, I think also the exiles end up finding them when they have to wander into the world of ruin, and then they get taken care of by them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's you're taken care of either way. And
Yeah.
I imagine like there's some people who leave, like they see the world as it really is,
Hmm.
and they immediately feel regret. And
Yeah.
then once they're taken in by these, the people beyond the veil, there's kind of this breakdown moment where they recognize what they've lost.
Hmm.
And it's like, but they're still treated with such kindness and empathy that it breaks them in a way that like is really powerful yet healing.
Yeah, it's like a rebirth because like now they've been given a body outside the
Yeah.
veil that feels real pain for once, but suddenly they feel real love too.
Oh,
Oh yeah. So essentially everyone gets what they want in the
Yeah.
end, right?
Yeah.
They gain the freedom that they sought and thought that they wanted so much, and yeah, okay. Yeah, I love that. That's really
Cool.
cool. Woo.
I think we were able to avoid lot of sad.
I know.
Yeah.
There's no
No,
Palpatine.
this
I'm so
is
mad.
yeah, there you know what, we can bring in actually no. Here's where we
Do
bring
it.
in Palpatine. Here's where we bring in Palpatine.
Do it.
Okay. Pro wrestlers,
Yes.
guess okay, I keep calling him Big Papa Palps because Scott Steiner is Big Papa Pump.
Oh my god.
That's the reference that I keep making. And yes, it's there's now a combination where yes, Emperor Palpatine is a pro wrestling heel named Big Papa
I
Palps.
love it.
It's now canon in this world.
I'm satisfied.
We are not going to top that, so this is where the episode ends. For the
Agree.
love of God. All right.
Connect
Thank
three.
you so much for listening. You've been wonderful. We appreciate you so much. And remember that if you want to help create worlds like this, you can always email us at worldbuildwithus@gmail.com, or you can send us a tweet at Let's Worldbuild. Just let us know how you're feeling. Make sure that you're doing okay. We really do hope that you're doing okay, by the way. It's rough out there. But remember that we love you very much. You're gonna get through the week, and we'll see you next time.